Hello and welcome to the first ever Forum on Public Diplomacy. Just to give you guys a little bit of an overview, this event is part of a larger project. These students and everyone else in the MPD graduating class of 2013 has spent the entire semester doing research. We've also had 6 weeks of workshops in preparation for this event. And Alex Sulagna and I built a website to host a network that will enhance everything that we work on in this program. Alex will be debuting that later today. Our main motivation was to have a space to showcase the work of MPDs to our most valued contacts, you. So thank you again for being here today. It really means a lot. And without further ado, I'm very proud to introduce my good friend and excellent colleague, Sulagna Misra. She traveled to London this past summer to attend the Olympics and to study its impact as a public diplomacy tool. So please join me in welcoming Sulagna Misra.
So yes, my project is called Metalheads because it's about fans of the Olympics. To be honest, I love the Olympics. I've been watching them since I was 8. I would stay up all night to see all the nations walk in the opening ceremonies, watch Taekwondo competition back when I still trained, and picked random countries to root for whenever the US or India wasn't playing. But I got really annoyed watching it on American television. There always seems to be something out of frame, out of sight. You see the corporate sponsors, the International Olympic Committee, the host nation, the competing nations, and the athletes. But see, you're awake now. Okay, but you don't see the audience. However, understanding the audience is the key to understanding the PD of the Olympics. I boiled it down to 3 key elements. First, shared experience. Obviously, you don't get the same sentiment at home when you're watching TV in your pajamas. There's a big difference between watching the games on NBC, watching them in a stadium of 80,000 people, and watching them in the Irish House. But more importantly, from a PD perspective, the Olympics provide person-to-person engagement and real-time experiences that pulls people through similar highs, emotional highs and lows, and makes people feel connected. And as you can see in this clip I wanted to show you, which is in the Irish House, as I mentioned before. It shows that connection and that special feeling you get when you watch it in real time.
Ireland is a small country. We've had very limited success over the years, but in boxing we seem to be able to fight. This is a girl, this is the first time that ladies boxing is at the Olympics, and this is the world champion in her division. She's been unbeaten for 7 years and she's now in the final.
I know that everyone thought she was a shoo-in to win, but I watched the match and she almost didn't.
Wow, I could stay here forever. I could really enjoy this forever.
And I wanted to know if any of you actually know who Katie Taylor is. No, right? Because from an on-site perspective, her win is important because experiencing it as it happens helps you situate yourself in that moment of history. As the man in the Irish flag notes, This is the first time women's boxing is in the Olympics, so that allows an Irish champion to become a global one. But the thing is, because of American television, we don't really see that. This ties into my next point. Branding. At the Olympics, you meet a variety of people from different nations and see how they see themselves. At hospitality houses, like the Irish house that you just saw, you were encouraged to become a fan for that nation. The Dutch fans in particular wore the color orange to show their pride and encouraged others to do the same, as you can see in this picture of Kia and I in the hospitality house, the Dutch hospitality house. Of course, you also see how countries see your nation, all based on a very specific criteria you have no control over. When people would find out we were American, they would say things like, "You're doing quite well," or "I like it when you guys lose." Now, this is standard, but instead of basing their ideas on politics, they base it on how you're doing it Olympics-wise. Some countries, like Jamaica, were extremely well known for their athletes, while other nations found themselves losing their cachet, like Europeans and Australians. From their perspective, when they win 8 gold medals, they see not wins to be celebrated, but an absence to be mourned. But other countries, like Tunisians, Jamaicans, and even the host country of the UK, celebrated each victory with equal enthusiasm. This leads to my next point, hope. When a country like Tunisia, the first nation in the Arab Spring, wins gold, it means something. When Team GB, or Great Britain, has celebrity athletes because they want to inspire a generation to play sport, it means something. When a Saudi Arabian woman participates in athletics when she comes from a country that has a public ban on women playing sports, it means something. All these elements point to what I think is a very key public diplomacy sentiment, the potential for progress. I think that's a very important part of being a fan of the Olympics. You enjoy it because you think it means something, and it does mean something because you believe in it. Thank you. Oh, and let me introduce the incredibly charming Ricardo to talk about a more classical version of PD.
Well, what I'm going to talk about is an historic case study of public diplomacy that I've been researching for the past 2 years in different classes. As some of you may know, 2013 has been chosen by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs as the Year of Italian Culture in the US. They're doing a whole series of events displaying Italian culture, science, education, the next generation, and also the ties between the US and Italy. So I thought, what greater year to organize an exhibit on the Letters to Italy campaign and the U.S. involvement in the Italian elections of 1948. The reason why I chose this topic, as I said, I've been researching it in different classes, and I think it displays a lot of the public diplomacy tools and best practices that we've been studying in the past years, like the importance of people-to-people diplomacy, the role of diaspora communities, and also the role of news media in shaping foreign policy. So just to make you understand what this Italian election meant in the US and in the world, a little bit of an historical context. These were the first democratic elections in Italy in more than 20 years since the fascist regime. So it was a pretty big deal. The other problem was that there was a rise in popularity of the left-wing parties in Italy due to the resistance in the war. They were the major parties in the resistance. And it had been seen already in the 1946 election for the Italian Constituent Assembly. So this became a major concern starting in 1947 because of the beginning of the Cold War. In 1947, we have the Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan. We also, Lippmann published a book that coined the term Cold War. So you can see in this historical context how the Italian elections and the victory of the Christian Democrat over the Communist Party became a major concern, especially for the US. So, but we see these big events, but I've learned a long time ago that history is also made by regular people actions. So I wanted to present today and go in depth into the role of the Italian American community in these elections. Major Italian American figures in the Italian American community, like George Spatuzza, was the president of the Order of Sons of Italy in America, which is one of the major Italian American organizations in the US. In 1947, before even the US acknowledged the geopolitical importance of Italy in world affairs, said and started encouraging people in the Italian community to send letters to their relatives and friends in Italy to, encourage them not to vote for the Communist Party and especially vote for the Christian Democratic Party. Other important figures are, for example, Generoso Pope, who was the editor and the owner of one of the most distributed Italian American newspapers in Italian in the US, called Il Progresso Italo-Americano. And basically what this started was that it started as just suggesting to send letters, and then it became a full-blown campaign where sample letters were published in newspapers, were distributed everywhere, and also illustrated postcards that basically were given to the Italian American people to send in mass to Italy to say, to vote, to not vote, to make them not vote for the Communist Party. So I thought this quote was very, poignant because it shows the power of people-to-people diplomacy. Generoso Pope said, "I started the campaign realizing that the people of Italy would believe the truth when it was told by a brother or a friend or a blood relation." Another major part of this campaign, as I've said, were the sample letters. And you can see they played a lot with typical Italian values, like religion. You can see this was a sample letter that was published on March 27th, and it was like, this is Easter Sunday, and on April 18th, you have the destiny of the world on your shoulders, basically. It calls communism an enemy of God and the family. Again, very, very strong Italian values. And then the end, it shows the ties between the communities and the wish for a better world and a better Italy. And so this is the prayer which all of us Americans of Italian origins direct to you on this Easter day. So you can see the play on traditional Italian values. Another part where the postcards that came also with, captions like this: "A communist victory would ruin Italy. America would stop sending aid back to Italy." It basically told the Italian people that under communism there would be another regime. And these are some of the postcards that are very interesting. This shows, the difference between democracy and dictator, peace and happiness, and like war and tears. This shows justice opening the door to the Italian elections and seeing democracy, whereas on the other side, there's, a foreign regime. Other thing, this is resistance fighters coming out of their graves because they fought in vain during the war. This is the Iron Curtain being moved all the way up in front of Italy so that Americans cannot send help to their family and friends in southern Italy. So, you can see these were, they seem funny today, but these played on a lot of fears in the Italian people. They all, counted on the American help. So this campaign really struck close to home. It's hard to say the actual impact that it had, but a poll conducted in 1949, showed that 16% of the Italian people that responded to the poll said that they were in contact with their family in America. And this excludes France, so you can see how many of these people received this kind of mail. It is estimated that at the end of the campaign, more than 10 million pieces of mail were sent to Italy for free, because the program, when it became big, it was sponsored by the State Department and the US Post Office. So this is one side of the thing, and I don't have a lot of time to cover this other side, but I just wanted to give you a glimpse. This is the cover of Time magazine on the day after the election, and it shows Italian Prime Minister elected Alcide De Gasperi, and the caption said, "Can he cut the red tentacles?" And does, the communist octopus trying to destroy Italy. This is just the end of a campaign that in the US especially in the major newspapers and news magazines like the Washington Post and the New York Times, they played up the figure of Alcide de Gasperi as a positive figure for Italy and for growth and in the new bipolar world. And so this was just the end, and this is a whole other aspect that unfortunately I don't have time to cover today, but this shows, as I've said in the beginning, the power to people-to-people diplomacy, diaspora communities, and also the power of news media in public diplomacy. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me or mention me on Twitter. And now I leave the floor to my dear roommate Frank, who is going to give a little sneak peek into the MPD China Beijing trip that happened earlier this year.
Good morning. So the reason we all gel really well is because we have a passion for traveling. And also we have this constant curiosity of what's happening around the world. And we're a group of people who will not stop until we find the true answer. In January of 2013, a group of us, MPT students, led by our awesome colleagues, Xinru Ma and Sarah Meyer, went to the capital of China, Beijing, to understand and find out the reality of what exactly is Chinese diplomacy. Each one of us all had our secret little agenda to go a little deeper into what we want to know. However, as a group, we did have a passion for Chinese diplomacy. The video that I'm about to show you, unfortunately, cannot tell you everything that we've learned. I will need a one-week festival to do that with you, and I probably need each of my colleagues to come up and do one day of it. However, I am honored to be able to have this opportunity to show you a glimpse of what we experienced that has changed all of our lives. And before I show you this, the last thing I would like to share with you is, as an MPD student, I learned that we cannot just talk the talk, but we got to walk the walk. And for 2 years, I got to talk a lot. And I think now it's time for all of us to go walk the walk. And so thank you very much, and please enjoy this short little video.
The trip was incredible.
Yeah.
It was such a great experience for me. It was my first time in China, my first time in East Asia, actually.
Yeah.
So a completely new experience for me. But then Beijing in particular is an extraordinary city, and it was just a great opportunity for me to get to be there.
Hi everyone, right now we're on our way to our first stop on this trip, and we are going to Peking University. It is extremely cold right now in China, but we're extremely excited. We're going to be spending the whole day there, getting to know them, really dig deep into the whole notion of Chinese diplomacy, soft power, and also the relation between US and China.
Planning the trip for 9 months or so before we went, so a lot of work had gone into what we were doing and who we were meeting with, so I felt really confident that we were going to get sort of a great experience, great output.
And I really learned a lot from them, because before I went there, I thought this trip may be more about like lecturing and telling the Chinese people, like telling what China is doing and do those propaganda thing. But actually, we went there and heard all those mixed perspectives, and we feel like people there in China, inside China, they're arguing with each other. They are on their road to explore what public diplomacy is, and we learn so many different perspectives. I think that's fabulous.
We had this feeling going in that public diplomacy was being handled top-down in China, that there had been such an emphasis on public diplomacy that it was going to be a really easy process to figure out. And I think the biggest surprise when we got there was that it really isn't that organized.
One of the major differences that whoever is doing public diplomacy now in China, take the domestic audience very important, and I think that's a result of the very different political system in China and America. And as we study here, we think PD towards domestic audience is propaganda or even public affair. Couldn't call it PD, but in China is a part of definition.
I think even though I'm here, I cannot give a right or a universal definition of public diplomacy. So I feel like I cannot judge whether China has known about public diplomacy or not. I can only say that they are on their way to exploring it.
I'm working with one of my Chinese colleagues here at USC, and we're looking at the efficacy of Chinese soft power. So what we decided to do was take 2 case studies. One of the Beijing Capital Airport and the other of China's international film promotion, to look at what China's doing specifically in these areas in order to improve their soft power.
My focus is international broadcasting, majorly the CCTV. I interviewed a lady from CCTV, but unfortunately it's off the record. So as for how effective their program are, I think that's a part where they need to work.
I went to this trip with Sarah with a focus on internet and foreign policy. And basically we want to explore, because before we went there was a lot of coverage on China, how China's internet is influenced with China's foreign policy and American media, especially in China's relation with the Japan and other East Asian nations. And then we went there and want to explore whether the China's internet has this potential to influence foreign policy, and with this growing dynamics, this blossoming dynamics of social media in China, what kind of other governments are doing public diplomacy there in China through the internet. So it's kind of a 2-layered. First from the China's perspective, what they are doing, and the second, what the foreigners are doing there in China through the internet.
There's so many things I think China could use in public diplomacy. I think one of the major, my personal opinion is always one of the major audience or one of the major part that now is being missing is the Chinese students in America. There are thousands of them, and I think they are a very valuable source, and I do hold positive perspective for the future.
In terms of public diplomacy done by China, I feel current public diplomacy of China is focused too much on government's role. So I feel there is a great potential to use the non-state actors to do public diplomacy, especially private sectors as well as the students or those academics, all of them. And in terms of those study public diplomacy about China, especially those in the US, I feel if you have the opportunity just to go to China once, to see it, to listen to them, and I feel you will learn a lot from a single trip to there.
So, one of the things in being in Beijing is that there's a lot of stairs, especially our hotel is near a brand new subway, so the escalator doesn't even work. So we've been taking stairs every day. And when you're wearing such heavy jackets, it's really hard to get up. We just finished a meal, so the stairs are really, really difficult to walk. Okay, we're about to head out. Goodbye. Bye.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Karen, to talk more about her practicum in Cuba. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. As a visual artist, I wanted to explore the role that art has in public diplomacy. So why is art a powerful tool in public diplomacy? Well, I found its relevance in culture diplomacy, in its creative approach to developing unique program settings, attracting diverse audiences, stimulating public dialogue on social issues and ultimately inspiring action to make change. So for today, my discussions break down by 3 components. My field research, which comprises from my trip to Cuba. I went twice, both in May and in December, under President Obama's People-to-People initiative, and USC also has a license to study, and I went with some of my colleagues here in this room as well. And my field practice, I was a UNESCO intern since January of this, since January, and in my future initiative project, which is UN Imagine, it's an annual multimedia event. So in May, we happened to see the Havana Biennale, and I was interested in looking at the different types of art in public spaces. And so the 11th Biennale was important for its interaction with these, with public arts and being able to invite social dialogue and have partnerships. It was established in '84 by the Wilfredo Lam Center for Contemporary Art in partnership with the Ministry of Culture. And so there was about 180 participants from about 45 different countries, and the next Biennale will be in 2015. And Cuba thrives with its tourism in culture. The United States is actually the leading tourist, there's a lot of tourists from the United States. And so the United States is the one that leads with bringing in a lot of tourists, and for the 11th Biennale, there was over 1,300 Americans registered for the Biennale. So here are some examples of particular pieces that invoke social dialogue on, this is a theater with fiberglass ants. Okay, so these are 2 particular images that invoke discussions on travel, and the other piece is on recycled art, and it talks about the lack of iron in the country, and that's the scientific element for iron. And one collective that I noticed was the partnership, international partnership with JR and Cuban French artist and Cuban photographer Josep Parla. And in this collaborative effort, they used 25 senior citizens and took their images throughout and pasted them around the city. And so this is part of an international project that they have in Japan, and actually in their own back home in East LA, they have a couple of these images as well that really talks about the seniors around the world. And so they were participating along with the Biennale as well, and that's featured below. And so in December, I traveled once again. I was inspired from my first trip, and I wanted to know more about other international festivals and other international art gatherings. And so I went to the Havana, the 34th Annual International Film Festival, which ran from December 4th to the 14th. And it's a very popular international event, bringing a lot of filmmakers, actors from all over Latin America and the Caribbean. And so it's a very famous Cuban pastime, and it was started by Alfredo Guevara, who recently passed away this year, as a way that Fidel was using it to promote his initiatives with the Communist Party. But Guevara was as an artist, decided that this was film was a perfect medium to educate the masses and to invite other international voices into the island. And so I surveyed about 100 participants from artists, filmmakers, tourists, Cubans, anyone that really just wanted to talk to me about films and why they want to go. And so most people, they make a day out of it. And so here is a copy of one of the publications where each day they print out the film screenings for the day in the different theaters that are showing them. Unfortunately, there's no synopsis, so only you have is the name of the film, the director, and the country that you're going to be, that's the origin of the film. And so one downside was that you didn't know what film you were going to, but the plus was that you actually went out your way and communicated with both tourists and Cubans alike to know what they liked, which ones they preferred, which ones they knew was a good film. And so it got people talking. And the other is a poster that they have an annual competition around. And so these were both communication materials that promoted the film festival, along with the newspapers and the radio and the television as well. And as I mentioned, I had the opportunity of interviewing a couple of filmmakers, and so I had the opportunity of meeting Ivan Goloa, who he started this short film called Los Retratos, Portraits. And so he is of Colombian descent, and he was invited by a Swiss filmmaker that he met at the Swiss Film Festival. And so you see these interactions here. And so up in the top corner, you have the pasaporte, which is a passport, and you have, it's about like 5 crooks, maybe like 5 cents each, 50 cents each screening or so. And you had your passport that you would go along to each theater, and it was valid there, and you would just each film that you saw, they would take one out. So it was just very interesting to see his perspective on the festival and his invitation. And so in comparing both the Biennale and the Film Festival in terms of public diplomacy, I looked at the different types of art. And so the Biennale was mixed in the sense that it was not just the visual arts, there was dance, there was music. The Film Festival was mostly film, but there was concerts, there was some photography exhibits as well, but primarily the medium was just film. The audience was both heavily mixed. Both of them are during peak tourist seasons in Cuba. The cost for the Biennale it's primarily free. Some museums you have to pay a certain entrance, but it really depends. The film festival, roughly 50 cents per screening, and it's pretty cheap. Most Cubans they didn't have a problem with the cost. The downsides to each of the Biennale was that it was very hard to determine the turnout. You'd have to go to each and every single museum, and it was very, I have a copy of a map, and it was very scattered throughout Havana, and so it was very difficult to go around, and most museums did not keep a track of those kind of records and wouldn't allow me any access as well. And so there also, when you go to those spaces, they didn't have, they had a lot of misinformed docents or art educators at those spaces. You would ask, what's this piece about? And it was really hard. So a lot of the pieces were up to interpretation, which is a lot of what art does generally, but when you don't have someone who's there that does know information, it's very difficult to engage. And so the film festival, the timings of the film screenings, not everyone lived in central Havana. And also the film summary. Though it was a plus that I mentioned that you got people to engage, but it was very difficult to know, oh, what is this film about? And most of the popular films were from South America, and you know, it was all on word. It's like, oh, this film is really good. The upsides of the Biennale, the interactions with public space. The art was along the Malecón and along those public spaces where there's a lot of interaction with both tourists and locals. And so that was a great interaction there. The film festival, you can measure the turnout. You could see how many people are attending by the amount of tickets are being sold, and you could see how full the rooms are. And so most screenings would hold up anywhere between 250 to about 350. And the sizes varied, but it was very easy to get to each of the theaters. And they're all in central Havana for the most part. And so I decided to take my experience from the field and put it into practice. And so I had the opportunity this semester to intern with UNESCO New York office as their cultural diplomacy intern. And so I worked on several projects with their office, and I'm actually still with their office this year. And so my first project was Journeys to School, which profiled 11 countries and the way that children go to school. And so it talked about education. The second was our artist, Marcus Miller, who's a American jazz player. And he was holding a concert on behalf of UNESCO for the remembrance of slavery. And then the last but not least is the documentary on Tim Harrington, who it was 2 years ago that he passed away in Libya. He's a war photographer. And so UNESCO used this documentary to talk about the safety of war journalists and the safety of journalists in general. And so I decided to take what I learned both in the field and in my practice into creating an event called UN Imagine. And so this would be a multimedia event in response to, right now, the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is proposing for the post-2015 Millennial Development Goals, pushing youth to really get involved with the world campaigns. And so as you can see, we're on Twitter, we're on social media, and a lot of it is visual interactions. And so I got the idea of hosting this UN Imagine driven by UN youth, mostly UN interns. And the interns are composed, what I've learned in my experience the last couple months is that the UN cannot function without the help of interns. There are over 400 interns within the UN system, and so the UN interns have the opportunity and platform to propose this event to Ban Ki-moon, and so it's still in the process. But anyways, this initiative would be to expand the understanding, to increase the understanding of the changing role of art has as a tool for public diplomacy. And the tentative date is for later in June, and held at the UN. And so my dream team panel speakers, if I had my wish, and which we're still working on, we have a couple of familiar faces on here. And I'll mention, due to time, I won't mention all of them, but Stephanie Stallings, who I want to highlight, she has been a great support so far. And she's part of Arts Diplomacy Network that has over 100 participants within her database that are using, both in the State Department, both nationally and internationally, of people and programs that are using art diplomacy currently. And then also Ahmed, who is the UN Youth Envoy, and he's just great trying to, actually today he's having a Google Hangout for youth to really get their voice into the UN. And so there will be a gallery showcase with a panel discussion as well, and a high presence on social media. As my colleagues have mentioned, the importance of social media, both on Facebook and Twitter. And then the evaluation for this project would be to see how much we've impacted through, what kind of imprint we have on social media, having a survey both pre and post, and developing a report as well. And like I said, this would be an annual event. And so it's still in the process, so I will be happy to give you guys more updates. And so overall, as you can see, with the Havana Biennale, the Havana Film Festival, and UNESCO, both my field research, my practice, and my initiative, I see that the importance of art has such a value within creating a diverse audience, being able to engage in dialogue. Art has a way that is not intrusive, and I've noticed that people are more inclined to sign up for art initiative events. And you could, in that process, you could introduce your own agenda and your own initiatives, as you notice within these projects, on either education issues, on the safety of journalists. And so ultimately, these engagements inspire action and to create change in the world. And so thank you so much for your time. And I invite you to join the conversation on Arts Diplomacy Network. You can visit their website or follow them on Twitter. So thank you again.
Okay, great. Well, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce one of my favorite colleagues, Lisa Liberatore. I firmly believe that Lisa has a wonderful future in this field, in her research that she's done in front of her. This summer, she was an intern at UN Women, and she's been working on her project called Fashion Diplomacy. Please join me in welcoming Lisa.
Thank you, Kelsey. So I did my practicum on fashion diplomacy as a concept. And so I defined this on my blog, which is the result of my practicum, through two main components. The first is the way appearance is used as a tool of communication and power, and the second is the economic role of the fashion industry globally. So why do I focus on women? Coco Chanel once said, "Dress shabbily and they remember the dress, but dress impeccably and they remember the woman." So the key to tapping into the positive power of appearance is using it as a way to enhance a message instead of distract from it. The use of fashion is not an end in of itself, but rather a means to reach a greater goal. Throughout my research, I argue that women can use their appearance as an advantage through what is defined as feminine visibility and a reframing of power as feminine. Feminine visibility, simply put, is the physical presence of women as feminine in all dimensions of society and leadership. A feminine appearance is defined in contrast to masculinity as the embodiment of colored design, aesthetic adornment, and the fluidity of clothing, in contrast to the rigid uniformity that often defines men's clothing. The idea of power as masculine in nature has shaped much of how appearance is defined as powerful. But in the last 20 years, the power and appearance as it relates to the female dress and presence has been redefined due in part to new forms of media and the power of a visual image. So in order to be perceived as powerful players in society and reach the highest levels, women adopted masculine characteristics in their dress. The female power suit was established in the mid-1970s as a staple for powerful women to level the playing field with men in positions of leadership. Outward displays of femininity were considered a sign of weakness, especially at the highest levels of society. Yet I argue that when women are visibly present as feminine in what were once considered masculine arenas, they will better represent the needs of the often invisible private sphere. And in turn, they'll cause a reevaluation of the balance between home and the workplace, which has the potential to create new gender norms. Women's unique contributions will be made more visible and will then be more value added in addition to the already established masculine notions of power. So in my research, I highlight a recent case in the presidential election when Ann Romney made a statement with her appearance by wearing Oscar de la Renta numerous times throughout the campaign. The significance of this is found in the fact that Michelle Obama has actually never worn anything by Oscar de la Renta, who is an American designer known for being a staple in a First Lady's wardrobe. This may be in part because de la Renta criticized Michelle last year for not wearing an American designed dress to a Chinese state dinner where trade relations were the topic of discussion. So appearance is powerful, and women in particular must understand the way in which it communicates. Hillary Clinton and Margaret Thatcher both made certain statements in executive politics by being visibly present as women. Hillary Clinton was very aware of the image that she created leading up to her campaign in 2008. Even before running for president, as a senator, she strived to exude a more masculine appearance in order to distinguish herself from the hyper-feminine appearance she had created as First Lady. Yet this did not prove particularly successful for her. In the years following her campaign for president, she successfully created a more feminine image of herself through her appearance as Secretary of State, which may prove well for her in future endeavors. Margaret Thatcher, on the other hand, was known around the fashion world for her signature pearls and bows. She understood the power of an image and the way in which she used her appearance by playing up her femininity. This complemented her greater political message of consistency and conservatism. She emphasized her femininity in a way that made her more qualified for the job, even if at times she acted in a masculine manner. In addition to women executives, wives of leaders are in a distinct soft power position to use their image as a tool of communication. Through the soft power or the attraction of their appearance, First Lady Jackie Kennedy and Duchess Kate Middleton convey a certain unparalleled image to the world. Both of these ladies gain the favor of their neighbors at home and the audience abroad without necessarily using words. In my research on my blog, I explore each woman's soft power as a direct reflection of the nation she represents. Now I will explain the second overarching component of fashion diplomacy, and that is the economic role of the fashion industry globally. In the last few years, the fashion industry has tapped into its social power to positively influence public diplomacy as part of transnational advocacy networks through both corporate and cultural diplomacy. Kate Spade's Hand in Hand collection is one such project that seeks to empower women through the production and purchase of fashion. It was launched in 2009 in partnership with the NGO Women for Women International to economically empower women in war-torn countries by providing the necessary supplies to create products and then paying the women for their labor. In 2011 alone, nearly 400 jobs were created in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Rwanda through the Hand in Hand collection. The achievement of this collection indicates a new trend in the global fashion industry that has tremendous selling power, as noted in its ability to sell out within a matter of hours after it was first launched online by Kate Spade. Its continued success is realized in part because of its use of information politics, one of the necessary strategies employed by transnational advocacy networks that focuses on the power of the narrative. Stories of the women producing the fashion items are shared in magazine features such as the October 2011 Faces of Hope article pictured above. And this further connects the producer to the buyer. And the interconnectedness is made possible by the transnational network that is joined together through the value of appearance. Additionally, when these US-based companies engage in these types of partnerships, they unintentionally represent the US and they create soft power through their presence in developing countries. I recently held a blog launch event where I highlighted smaller fashion companies that are globally empowering women. It took place at a giving boutique that sells good designs made by great causes that tell amazing stories of hope from around the world. And I want to share a few of those with you. 31 Bits brings a new, fresh perspective to peace and development work through the medium of jewelry. The 108 women that 31 Bits currently employs in Gulu, northern Uganda, are considered entrepreneurs and specialists in their crafts and are never referred to as victims. The company connects the women to life skills programs that enable them to envision a successful future and prevent them from depending solely on the company itself. In this way, it is not relief or rescue work, but rather sustainable peace development. In each fashion season, 31 Bits launches a new jewelry collection complete with new colors, designs, and concepts, thus validating its status as a fashion-forward company. Another company featured at my event was Crochet Kids, working in Peru and Uganda. They employ over 150 women through a model that not only provides economically, but also brings education and mentorship. They have the capability to directly connect the producer to the buyer through an innovative design concept. Each crocheted item has the signature of its maker inside. When someone purchases an item, they feel an instant connection to the creator, and they can actually go directly on the Crochet Kids website to see her picture and send her a thank you note. In this way, they build a foundation for increased relationships, which is key to empowerment and sustainability. And one final company I want to bring to your attention is iSanctuary, working in India to bring an end to human trafficking through the creation of fashion. The items created by the rescued girls, ages 12 to 25, ranging from jewelry to coasters to stationery, are used as tools of awareness to spread their message of hope. It is not enough to simply liberate those who have been trafficked. These girls must be given the tools to reintegrate into society, especially through economic self-sustainability. iSanctuary stands in this necessary gap of transition. They work to ensure survivors receive all the elements necessary for restoration, including education, counseling, vocational training, and mental, emotional, and spiritual healing. Many of you attended my blog launch event, and I want to say a big thank you for contributing to its success. We had over 50 people in attendance, and the organizations featured were thrilled at the outpouring of support and sales. And in the future, I hope to continue finding creative ways to highlight these small companies that are really doing it right. So for more information, please refer to my blog. The link can also be found in your programs. Thank you for allowing me to present some of my research. And I'd now like to introduce you to David Mandel, who will share some of his work on another non-state actor that has changed the public diplomacy landscape. He proposes that Al-Qaeda can be beat through counterterrorism in 3 easy steps. Welcome, David.
Good morning. First of all, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak today, which is thank you to Kelsey and Alex for organizing this event. I want to thank my peers for encouraging me to participate, and I'd like to thank my family and all of our family and friends who are here in the audience today. It really means a lot to us. Before I share the research I've been doing with you, I'm going to start by showing you a short video clip. It's a clip that in some ways is the reason I'm here today. Volume.
And every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Reeling still and subject to endlessly replayed videos of death and disaster, President Bush's words of self-righteous anger and affirmation no doubt soothed a nation in shock. Al-Qaeda had deliberately and indiscriminately attacked the United States. There were over 3,000 casualties, billions of dollars of damage, and the complete or partial destruction of 2 of the most symbolic buildings in our country. Of course we had to respond. The world had to be on our side. We had to stand up to evil. We had to declare a global war on terror. Over a decade, 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and an unknown number of CIA operations later, Al-Qaeda continues to operate. Although the U.S. has been successful in its operations to pursue Al-Qaeda's top leadership, the past 5 years have witnessed a proliferation of Al-Qaeda light groups in northern Africa, Somalia, and most recently in Mali. Even though President Obama has eschewed the phrase, the US is still very much fighting the war on terror and losing it. But this does not have to be. Since beginning my education with my bachelor's degree at Brandeis 6 years ago and continuing at USC, I've studied international relations, American politics, ethnic conflict, intercultural communications, public diplomacy, and so much more. And after all of these studies, I have come to a surprising conclusion. Al-Qaeda can be beaten in 3 easy steps. So what's step 1? This is what you all want to know. Step 1, know thy enemy. Though hard to define, terrorism seems easy to spot. One may use the Supreme Court's famous pornography test to explain how most people understand the concept. I know it when I see it. The problem with this formulation is twofold. First, it's subjective. The aphorism, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, sort of explains how. But secondly, it's devoid of objective criteria by which scholars or lay people can classify the world around them. It doesn't help to not have a real definition. And the definitions of terrorism that do exist tend to either be too specific, such that certain terrorists wouldn't even be included, or so vague as to construe even a polemicist as a terrorist. So even though we've all been terrified by Tom Friedman, I'm not sure he's a terrorist. The lack of acceptance of a single definition hampered my research. So I formulated my own, which informs every aspect of this presentation. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go through the exact definition, but if you're interested in it, I'm happy to share it with you later. The power of a terrorist is not merely a reflection of materiel, but rather a function of the target audience's response to threats and violence. Moreover, action taken by terrorists can produce different outcomes among different groups. That is, a single act of terrorism can simultaneously attract the sympathy of important local constituencies and repel, co-opt, or coerce civil society and the global public. Some definitions of terrorism insist that the use of force or threat of force must be indiscriminate. But terrorists are often very discriminate in whom they target or how much damage is done. For instance, the Basque terrorist group ETA informs the authorities before its bombs goes off so that they can evacuate the area in danger. Their goal is to ensure that the public knows that they can plant bombs, not to harm people. For terrorists, the intended result of hard power tactics has more to do with expressing identity and compelling action from its opponents that would discredit them rather than securing tactical victory. So now, with a basic understanding of what a terrorist is, we need to understand who Al-Qaeda is. What is Al-Qaeda? Al-Qaeda is a transnational network of is a transnational terrorist network of Salafi Islamists with the goal of engendering a pan-Islamic revolutionary movement that would result in the creation of a new caliphate, a unitary Islamic polity. Al-Qaeda's grand strategy is to use violence against the citizens of nations that are supportive of the United States or repressive of Al-Qaeda's supporters in order to catalyze a larger conflict between Islam and the rest. In order to do this, Al-Qaeda requires motivated foot soldiers and publicity for its actions. Al-Qaeda has taken advantage of the internet revolution to spread its message to a larger audience. By building a digital network through which to disseminate its message, Al-Qaeda has been able to increase its base of public support from which it draws its operative force. Without people and attention, Al-Qaeda would be unable to launch the violent attacks that have any significant impact. Thus, the most important source of Al-Qaeda's power is its ability to communicate messages of attraction. It is clear what differentiates a terrorist network from other sources of violent conflict. The impact of the attack far exceeds the sum of the damage. Bin Laden understood that Al-Qaeda could only win by drawing the US into larger conflicts in the Middle East that would engender two results: greater Muslim resistance and unity on the one hand, and significant costs, financial, political, and personal, to the United States on the other. Thus, President Bush was inadvertently doing exactly what bin Laden hoped when he declared the global war on terror. Understanding what a terrorist network is, how it operates, and the nature of its power are essential first steps to defeating al-Qaeda. So now you ask, what's step 2? Step 2 is to target the target audience and ignore the terrorist. As I've said, the efficacy of al-Qaeda is not a function of its ability to destroy, but rather a function of its ability to attract, co-opt, and repel target audiences. Al-Qaeda is not defined by the individuals who make up its network, but by the identity engendered in its strategy. Thus, even if one were to kill every single member of al-Qaeda, it would not be equivalent to destroying al-Qaeda. At any point in time, any person could perpetrate an act of terrorist and call themselves al-Qaeda, and to the global public it would feel the same. There would be no obvious difference. Thus, efforts to defeat al-Qaeda should be focused on its target audiences, not the perpetrators themselves. In any action, al-Qaeda has 3 target audiences: the victims, the supporters, and everybody else. A robust approach to counterterrorism that is focused on the target audience must include a commitment to public diplomacy and development, including a campaign to educate the global public on the nature of terrorists. Moreover, facilitating exchanges between potential supporters and possible victims of al-Qaeda would make it more difficult for al-Qaeda to define the 2 audiences as diametrically opposed. It would be impossible to convince people that they should kill every one of the other. Finally, al-Qaeda fills its ranks with those who have the most to lose, or least to lose, almost entirely young men with no job prospects. Investing in foreign aid and promoting good governance in countries with high risk of youth radicalization would go a long way towards starving al-Qaeda of its base of support. Including these public diplomacy strategies with traditional hard power-based counterterrorism tactics is the best short-term and long-term approach. Now, some of my critics will say that neither killing everyone who frightens us nor providing unlimited aid to those who need it can prevent violence, that there will always be terrorism. And those critics would be correct, which brings me to step 3. Accept that life is unpredictable and sometimes tragic. As English political theorist Thomas Hobbes famously concluded, life is nasty, brutish, and short. Tragedy, pain, and loss are a natural part of life that can never be foreseen or controlled. For others to prey on the fear of the many for the benefit of themselves is wrong. Yet resorting to violence will always be attractive to those who are disillusioned and fanatical. But its effect, the effect of violence, doesn't correlate to its strength. Our response is their power. Rather than fight only, we must commit ourselves to the slow and hard work of development and diplomacy, even as we all come to accept that which we cannot control. Until we, the global public, can accept the unpredictable, chaotic, and yes, occasionally violent reality of life, the terrorists will always win. Ultimately, this can be expressed axiomatically. Terrorism is a phenomenon that must be managed rather than a problem to be solved. Thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Alex Laverty, a man so in love with the PD program that he just couldn't say goodbye and had to stick around to tell us all about this amazing website and digital platform that he, Salagna, and and Kelsey have been putting together. Actually got 3rd place in an innovation forum, so this is a very exciting program.
Thank you, David. Of course, David's making reference to that this is my 3rd year here at USC. Let's actually put that. And he is right that I loved it so much that I could not leave.
So, like David alluded to, this is the project that Kelsey, myself, and Slogn have been working on for about 6 months. We call it the Ambassador. And let me give you a bit of an overview about how we came to coming up with this idea. As everyone's well aware, USC in Annenberg was the first program to house a public diplomacy program here in the United States. However, as interest in the field has been growing, there have been other organizations that are coming after us, because they see us as the best school for public diplomacy. And with that target on our back, we have to continue to innovate before the rest close in. We need to make sure that the innovation that's inherent in the California spirit is sort of shown right here at USC. We also need a home. Public diplomacy doesn't have a digital home on the web. There's not a place where you can go and see, what's the journal to read? Where do you find best practices? How do you know that USC is the best public diplomacy program in the world? There's no place to go and find that out. And so our epistemic community needs sort of a roof that includes the diversity of all these individual actors to be able to come and learn and also understand what public diplomacy is. And we need to build that place right here as a rightful home at USC. We also want to strengthen our alumni connection. USC is famous for its Trojan family. Now, the MPD program has an added challenge because our graduates go into so many multiple and diverse and spread out fields, that's very hard to sort of bring them back home and stay connected with them. But our ability to connect with our alumni, it's incredibly important because they're out there in the field knowing what the tools and skills that they learned here, how they're being applied in the real world. We also need to rely on them for the feedback. How can we update and adapt our skills so that we're always staying current, so we're always staying on the leading edge of what public diplomacy is? So it calls for some innovation. So over the past 6 months, Kelsey, Slug, and myself have been working on these problems, these ideas, and think about how do we solve them. And so the solution to our project is Idea Ambassador. It's a new take on crowdsourcing, what we call crowd intel, and it'll provide advice on public diplomacy projects, courtesy of the students of public diplomacy, aimed at the practitioners of public diplomacy. So we hope to promote public diplomacy by giving it its own little home on the web. We're going to connect diverse talent by partnering the students with the right skills, with the right projects. And we're also going to be able to create sustainable relationships by giving alumni a place to come and always feel connected to where they are. But before we get into how it works, I sort of want to talk about who's going to be using this. So on the left side, we have our academia, we have our scholars who have the resources and talent. And on the right side, we have the organizations who need that talent, need those resources to implement really great public diplomacy projects. It's also going to be a place where outside actors, so take the LA Times, AP, Al Jazeera, can come and learn what is public diplomacy. When you have that place, when you need an expert, when you need a Phil Sieg, when you need a Nick Cull, how do you go and find out who they are? This is going to be that place. And that market is huge. You have the government, you have NGOs, you even have companies that are doing nation branding. All these people are interested in our field and in our skills. So you can see the potential user base is massive. Let me tell you a little bit how it works. So practitioners would post projects, either upcoming or ongoing, where they specify a type of talent that they need. Maybe it's a regional specialty, maybe it's an experience with topics like fashion diplomacy, or maybe it's even a specific skill set, like social media evaluation that you'll hear from Kelsey. But the key to this is how we partner the talent with the projects. And that's really key when you have a professional-to-professional network. So when a user signs up, they'll fill out their profile for the experience, skills, and talent that they have. So for me, I'd put in Africa, I'd put in foreign policy, new technology, sports diplomacy. So whenever a new project posts with those tags, it'll automatically appear under my profile as a suggested project to join. Now this makes it incredibly easy to partner the right people with the right projects. Now you'll also just be able to browse projects by tags, view them in your news feed. But in the future, this is going to be where you make your name as a public diplomat. This is where your portfolio is going to reside. And it's going to be a great meeting place for the great minds of public diplomacy. And this is how we really start to build a crowd intel platform, by bringing all these actors to it. That's just our working prototype, but we already think it achieves our 3 objectives. It communicates the innovations that are coming out of USC. And this is really important. 5 years ago, no one would have imagined that the Secretary of State would have been on Google Plus and having a Google Hangout. We need to be thinking about what's the next 5 years going to look like for our field. It also connects practitioners and scholars in a way that we've never had before. And third, it's going to continue that great relationship that we already have with alumni, but giving them that central place where they can come, stay connected to the school, but also influence the next generation of public diplomacy scholars right here at USC. So the best part is, even though my team ran out of funding, there's actually still a future for this project. And I'm proud to announce that APDS has taken this project on and that they'll be running it going forward. And they'll be able to continue the work that we've already started. We believe we've laid the foundation for the future digital home of public diplomacy, and we hope you'll agree that this project fills a critical need and that you'll stay connected with APDS and support it in its future endeavors. So we see ID Ambassador as a pressing need in our field, and it's lacking this right now, but it also is going to help global diplomatic communications worldwide. And our team believes that through communication, we can achieve peace. Thank you very much. Next up is Kelsey Suemnicht. I've already talked about, I've mentioned that I've been working with her for about 6 months. Many times we've been attached to the hip, and people can't tell us apart. It's been a pleasure working with her. She has some really exciting research that she's been doing independently that sort of stemmed from her internship with Alec Ross at the State Department last summer. So this is sort of the findings that she'll present to you now.
Okay, hi. My name's Kelsey Suemnicht, and my research question is, could social media change the way that we conduct public diplomacy? And what impact does digital diplomacy have, if any, on foreign policy? And to answer this question, I interviewed over 30 different practitioners in Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley, and London to attempt to define digital diplomacy and forecast its future. I was personally driven by my desire to live in a world where publics begin to have a say in the foreign policies that govern them. I quote many diverse sources, and my research is ongoing, which you can check out on my blog, but I'll share with you a summary of my findings thus far. We used to have to gain an audience with our leaders, and this opportunity was reserved for an elite few, or an able few, as is the case for Christopher Columbus here. And it was our privilege to be present and listen to what leadership had to say. But now we have social media that helps publics communicate with leaders about the issues that matter most to us. We, the people, now has a distinct voice and a channel through which we can communicate that voice. But it turns out my conclusion regarding social media is not about the crowd speaking louder to government. It's about allowing government to listen more effectively to the crowd. And we must change the way we think about social media, utilize its evaluation metrics, and use it as a supplemental tool to traditional public diplomacy. My interpretation of the goals of public diplomacy are to inform, to advocate, to listen, to connect, to engage, and in the best case scenario, public diplomacy builds capacity that enhances international relations and foreign policy implementation. Now, applying these goals to digital diplomacy presents us with some pros and cons. In other words, these are challenges that my research proves can be overcome. Skeptics say social media could be just as likely to strengthen authoritarian regimes as it is to weaken them. This statement remains because we haven't yet implemented evaluation that can prove this either way. But I would like to contradict this by reminding us that censorship and propaganda have higher costs to maintain than open forums for freedom of speech. A great example occurred this February when China was pressured to address its environmental standards. The U.S. Embassy in Beijing operates its own pollution monitor, releasing hourly figures by Twitter. And in the past 2 years, citizens noticed large discrepancies between the official Chinese figures and the U.S. ones. Publics began to question whether the Chinese statistics had been falsified. With a constant digital presence now, organizations are forced to become more transparent and accountable. Without digital outreach like this, Beijing may not have taken emergency action, shutting down factories, and they took a third of official cars off the road. Because of the US Embassy broadcasting directly to foreign audiences, Beijing is now vowing to cut air pollution by 15% over the next 5 years. A very measurable thing, and that's what we need more in public diplomacy. And this is something that citizens may not have been able to do without the online forum. So the next con is that the true global reach of the internet is limited and access is selective in many countries. But as one of my favorite scholars, Clay Shirky, says, access to conversation is far more important than access to information, especially in a political sense. This is exemplified through the US's virtual embassy in Iran. Since, obviously, the United States does not have a presence physically on the ground in Tehran, it has a virtual embassy, which is headquartered on this website. It's actually shut down repeatedly by the Iranian internet authorities, but State Department officials like Alec Ross and Tara Sonnenschein have said that it's actually encouraging when this happens because it means that Iranian publics are using this resource. And if it wasn't useful, it wouldn't be targeted. This virtual embassy is one of the only means U.S. diplomacy has to engage with Iranian publics. This digital presence presents an opportunity that traditional diplomacy otherwise wouldn't. However, skeptics would say that social media gives voice to those who are dramatic, who want to broadcast their extreme views. We've seen many examples of this. But I say social media is, in its fundamental nature, a culture of sharing and an enabler of two-way engagement and collaboration. And those extreme voices can be valuable if we let them be in the right ways. A dynamic example is that of U.S. Ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford, who has distinguished himself for his willingness to take personal risks as well as to deliver candid messages directly to the public. So as the civil war in Syria began to gain momentum in 2011, the ambassador engaged audiences by posting on his Facebook page. I quote, "While reviewing recent posts, I found several thoughtful comments by persons who are strongly critical of American policy. I respect that they ask hard questions and they deserve answers. This brings a human face to the authorities dealing with the Civil War, and it could have enhanced U.S. soft power while decreasing others." More importantly, among his comments on this note, he found warnings that current American efforts to unseat President Bashar al-Assad could endanger minorities in the country. So by embracing the conversation on social media, Ambassador Ford helped to better organize the embassy's response plan. The ambassador invited criticism, but through analysis, he found valuable information that he may not have been otherwise able to find through traditional diplomacy. So given these three examples, how can we progress in digital diplomacy? We must exercise best practices, meaning, first, we utilize evaluation mechanisms. A campaign is only as successful as you can prove it to be. Social media metrics are currently vastly underused, as we saw in the Beijing case. A great example is I recently conducted website analytics and Facebook insights for the Center on Public Diplomacy, and it's helping them to see what topics are most discussed and where their strongest audiences are located. This is a screenshot for generic Facebook insights, so this is not CPD's data, just a note. Next, in best practices. As public diplomats, we cannot let social media stand alone. It's important to supplement it with events and genuine people-to-people engagement so that it is enhancing, not substituting for, diplomatic actions on the ground. And this is where the well-rounded diplomacy was missing in the Iran case, because it's only one-sided with the virtual embassy, the website. My favorite example of this right now is the social media outreach for our very own student-run APDS annual conference. We reached completely new audiences worldwide with 34 new followers in just one day, 635 tweets with our own hashtag, and 400 views with our live web stream. But it was entirely rooted in our person-to-person programming here on campus. Finally, it's necessary to develop individualized best practices. The most effective way to engage is specialized messaging, and the best people to develop that are us, the diplomatic teams on the ground, who will know their audiences in a multifaceted way, just like Ambassador Ford showed us in Syria. This means integrating the practices of social media into how we train our diplomats in strategic communications. It also means recognizing that there is a clear digital divide between those who are equipped with and fluent in digital media, not only a generational gap, but a developmental one. But the digital diplomacy horizon is one where we can see everyone will be connected by one digital network or another. I actually started my research with more of a question of, can we crowdsource foreign policy, giving everyone, I was interested in a way to give everyone a say in international relations. But my research has proved my optimistic spirit wrong, that the answer is no. But the reason why these findings remain important to me is that through social media, there now exists a way to measure sentiment, even if it's subtle. Social media gives us numbers that can distinctly say what people are feeling and how they're communicating about issues, countries, international politics. And these numbers mean more than simple polls because it's truly what people feel and believe and talk about with their most valued contacts. It's my personal hope that when governments, such as my own, decide to invade a country like, let's say, Iraq, public diplomats can approach leaders with the hard, fast social media numbers that state a foreign public won't appreciate an invasion, and here's when, where, why, and how those publics are discussing your key international decisions. In conclusion, my call to action is one that involves recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of social media and using social media as a supplementary tool in public diplomacy. If we want to live in a world where publics start to have a say in the foreign policies that govern them, it's time to embrace social media evaluation mechanisms that can provide us with tools to change the way we conduct engagement. Thanks.
So that brings us to the end of the first forum on public diplomacy here at USC. Please.
Can I say a few words on it?
That's why I was just going to call you up. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm a member of the first year MPD class, and I just wanted to take a few seconds. This was not rehearsed, so I don't have a presentation, but I just wanted to thank all the second years and congratulate you. But you guys have been so inspirational to us. Really, I mean, I don't know how we're going to follow in your footsteps, but it's been an amazing year, from the tailgates to, you know, wrestling through finals week. We really have learned so much from you guys. And especially one person who has taken us all through this year, Kelsey, who has been here for each and every one of us. I mean, God, I don't know how you can smile that much, but you do it. And so we all wanted to thank you especially and all the second years, and congratulations. And I wish I had flowers for all of you, but Kelsey, we wanted to give you this as a token of our appreciation. Anyway, now you can go.
Okay. I like to follow that now. So we want to make sure we thank Nick for his support of this event. It wouldn't have happened without you. Thank you, Nick. Also, Gail Light isn't here, but she was a massive resource for Kelsey and I, just sort of putting together logistics, playing defense for us. Arna's already thanked the students, so I can't do that again. But I also want to say thank you to the parents who've shown up today. You guys are the reason that we're all here. We hope that this is sort of a new tradition here at USC, and we're confident the second years are going to be able to follow us in the future. So thank you for coming.